Hello, everyone. It's me, Gary, back once again with a Cuppa chat here on the Panto archive. And I'm joined once again by a very, very, very special guest. So, special guest, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Sam. I'm a freelance performer and creative, and I've been doing Panto for the last, I want to say, last 9 years professionally. I've lost track by this point.
Wonderful. Well, welcome, Sam, to the Cuppa chat. Now, before we go any further, it would be very rude of me not to ask you what drink you would like for the Cuppa chat. I've got my B cup today with, as always, the black currant inside of it. I'm not much of a hot drinker, but what have you got in your cup today?
Oh, well, I stayed true to form because it's cup of chat. So I've got a lovely cup of tea in my little gay dinosaur mug.
Very nice. And is it any special tea or is it just normal tea?
Funnily enough, it's actually fancy tea because I've literally just moved flat, and my mum, bless her, has sent me up some fancy tea from back home in Devon. So I've got a fancy cuppa.
Oh, so we're not just Tesco value stuff here. Then we've got
Uh,
nice tea.
we've got like small little, probably came from a little cottage somewhere in the middle of the valleys down in Exmouth. So it's nice.
Oh, lovely. Oh, great. Well, at least you're settled in. You've got your drink sorted. Now you said you've been doing Panto for 7 or 8 years, was it? 8 or 9 years?
Around about that, yeah.
Yeah. What do you do in the Panto world? Tell everyone what you get up to.
So for the last, I mean, pretty much every year since I've been doing it, because I started off same as most people when I was a teenager growing up. So I did Andram, which was like a wide mix of characters. For the last sort of, I think it's because I've worked with a company called Trio Entertainment for the last, it will be my 7th year working with them. And it's been a mix of most years I've been on stage, generally playing the Prince in Panto. But I also have directed for them a couple of times, company managed. And so for this year, I'm doing a mixture of all three, same as I did last year. So I'm in it, directing it, and company managing it. So a bit of jack of all trades, really.
Wow, wow, wow. Yeah, I mean, from a Panto background myself, we've all done a bit of directing. We all love being on the stage. I've done a bit of stage management, but doing all three at the same time, does it take its toll on you? Is it okay?
Oh,
Are you all right? That's what I'm really saying.
Do you know what happens is I get to the end of November and I go, do you know what? My blood pressure is far too low. I need a Panto season to get it back up again.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I don't know if it's the same for you, but I'm a little bit because I run my own company in non-Panto season. So I'm kind of used to doing a little bit of everything. And I think what I love with being able to direct and be in the show is you kind of get to see the best of both worlds, and it means that you're fully engaged with the whole show throughout the run, whereas it's easy enough to kind of slip into just the scenes you're at. So I kind of feel like I've managed to have a little bit of a stamp on everything, really.
Yeah. And we were saying this in a previous episode, which you can catch now. Go back and have a look at our previous episodes, that we were saying that sometimes we're all guilty of it. You pick up the script and you look what your lines are, and then you don't even realize there's certain scenes that are happening
Oh
because
yeah.
you've just looked at your bits, which every actor does, that is true. But of course, as a director, you have to know the whole show inside out. What preparations do you do for directing a Panto?
So in terms of the preparation that I tend to go for from the director's side is the script comes through. I lovingly take a bit of a sledgehammer to it every year and just go, let's see where we can update stuff, where we can sort of have a play around. And it's just building up base ideas. I don't tend to, in preparation, I go make sure I know all the layout. I know the tech side, what I want to do with it. But in terms of what the performer's going to do, I don't do a huge amount. I can't, because I like to, it's quite organic in how I have my rehearsal rooms, but it's more of going, I want to just throw this tiny little thing of these are ideas that I want to try. So for example, I directed Cinderella last year down in Sittingbourne, and I just went, I have no idea. I've not worked with the two performers who are playing the Ugly Sisters, but what I want is this little just thing to be threaded through the show where they do like a Mean Girls click throughout, but one of them can do it and the other one can, and it just escalates with them hitting the other ugly, hitting the set, and eventually it climaxed at the ball where basically they did the click and then hit a dancer in the face of a tray. So that's more what I do in my preparation, just little nuances that I can throw in with sort of quirky humor and see how that would play in the room.
Yeah, and I think actually it's really important, and I've always had utmost respect for directors that let you do it, that gives you the opportunity to show what you want to do with the character, and then let the director, as you say, add little moments in, or can we have a bit more of that? I think you actually get much more better results really from your performers in that way as well. Is that correct?
I completely agree. And I think it's kind of two factors on that. So one is that people really underestimate, if people, because there's obviously a wide range of people that do Panto every year, but people who are professional Panto performers. And I've been very lucky to work with them over the year alongside a mixture of other sort of musical theatre professionals and sort of TV stars that have come in. But when you work with a Panto professional, you really feel it. And I've been lucky to kind of, and because if you try and restrict what they do, then you're not letting them kind of reach that full potential. So you're kind of cheating the audience in a way. And in terms of directing, back when I was training, I did a directing module. And I remember someone said something that stuck with me for years whenever I direct. It's perfect. They said, a director is basically a mirror for the actors. And all you meant to do is just watch, reflect, and kind of tidy. If they ever figured out they could just put a big mirror, no director would ever work again. So I kind of employ a little bit of those two things whenever I go into a project.
You know what? I love that. I'm going to use that from now on. That a director is a mirror. That's a great way of thinking of it, and with a reflection on the scenes.
Yeah.
Do you find it? Because I mean, I've again been lucky enough to work with some directors that have also performed in it as well, and I know from experience speaking with them that it is a hard thing to do. Have you ever found anything that's been tricky that you've had to overcome when you've been performing in it as well? Because I mean, directors in the past have put themselves to the back as such from their performance side because they're trying to look after everyone else. Really, is there anything that's been hard for you when you've been doing that?
I am a little bit, in the sense of it's a bit tricky sometimes when you're trying to do both, that you almost forget that you're in the show as well half the time.
Yeah.
And you kind of, I feel a bit bad where for years, whenever I've been in scenes with people, especially for the last sort of 6 years, having done Prince's, so Principal Boy, the poor principal girl, I go, okay, well, I'll just be stood there for that bit when they're trying to get stuff and kind of get into, there's like trying to build chemistry with me going, yeah, just see where that light is. I'll be there at just assume I'm going to turn up. And then it gets to sort of day 4 in rehearsals and you go, I don't think I've actually learned any lines. I should probably go off and do that.
Yeah.
So I think that's the hard sort of balance, but it's a tricky one because I think for Prince, because I've done them so many times as well, that I take advantage of the fact that I know I can do this, but it's just sadly I do feel a bit bad to the detriment sometimes of the other performers that they can feel a little bit neglected in that side of the process.
Yeah, it's a juggling act completely. Let's move away from directing just for a second and talk about a bit more Prince, if
Of
that's
course.
okay.
Yeah.
Because it's the one role, I don't know why, Sam, but I've never been asked to be a Prince. I don't know. I've been waiting for my call. I wanted to be a Prince. I've missed that stage out.
Have you given them the right number?
Well, I think they've got it mixed up, you see. I always end up in a dress or as a comic. But the Prince side of it is always a role that everyone expects in a panto, obviously, certain pantos especially. But it is a hard role, I think. And I don't think some people understand that the Prince has a quite important role because sometimes he just turns up, saves the day, a bit of a song and a dance, a love scene maybe. But it is keeping it fresh, isn't it? How do you come across that when you're playing Prince?
So for that, I completely agree because it's the thing of the comic and the dame are so much more fun to play, and it's the hard. I think the part of the challenge is every time you see a scene with a comic and the dame, and then the Prince comes back on, and Ed Sheeran goes, "Oh, this is the boring bit now." Okay, so it's more of so I found it very early on the only way to keep myself sane because I think this is where people go wrong a lot of the times with princesses and princes is one frustratingly normally in a lot of scripts they're not written great. They're more because they're the storytellers, because ultimately they have to be there because if not there's no story at all. That's the whole point of them and the fairy and some to an extent the villain. So my way of approaching it is look at the script, and every time so many times you look at the script and then you look at a scene like 20 pages later and you go, I'm saying the exact same thing here. So I just straight away go, right, let's put it in my own voice, make sense of it. And my Princes, it's just I kind of go a little bit Lord Flashheart from Blackadder. That's the easiest approach on it. For whenever I do Prince Charming and when I've done other princes, you kind of soften it a bit, but they have to have this life to them because you've got to. That's the only way to kind of keep it engaging for audiences. So that's how I approach it basically, of going, okay, well, it was actually, if you know your place in the show, Steve, I think it was, yeah, Steve Arnold from Choreo, because I worked with him when I did my first job for Trio. He said it perfectly because he was playing my Dandini and basically went, always know your place. And as soon as you know your place, you know where the boundaries are and where you can play with it. So that's my best advice for anyone who is playing a prince or a princess. Remember your place in the show. Never try and steal the comics laugh or the dame's laugh. Never do that. But when you're volleying with them, you've got to remember you're the setup to stuff. And it's once you know that and then you twist it a little bit, you can have so much more fun. And that's how you keep yourself sane. And I say this all with the caveat of this is the first year that I've finally not playing a prince because I've been trying for years to not have to play them anymore for my sanity.
Who are you playing this year then? Come on, give us the gossip.
So this year I'm playing Gaston in Beauty and the Beast. So
Ah,
complete 180 from everything I've been doing the last few
oh,
years.
so a villain role this
Yeah.
year for you. So, I love a good villain. You know, I
Mm.
love. I mean, I end up being ugly sisters or whatever, but I love a good villain when I watch a panto. So,
Yeah.
how do you prepare yourself from some people who are watching? Obviously, never done a panto before. How do you prepare being a villain than being the hero of the day? Is it quite similar, or what
So
do you have to do?
to an extent, that everything's got similarities. I think it's where it all sounds a little bit. It sounds really. It's going to sound really pretentious in what I say, and then I'm going to really, really streamline it and make it simple. Because you go back to, and I remember running panto workshops years ago on this, to figure out how you prepare just your base standard of your voice and your walk. So it's figuring out how you're going to speak, how you're going to walk, and it's going back to that commedia dell'arte archetype kind of thing. So which part of your body moves you when you leave? Once you've got that, it's then for villains. I think the prep is just knowing because I'm the voice this year. I think with the sound, my plan is having discussed it through with the producers and all of that. It's going to be a very questionable French accent. So there's going to be comedy within that.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful that none of my French friends are coming down to watch it. And so that's the sort of prep approach that I take. Go with those two very basic things. But my biggest advice for villains, having learned this the hard way back in Amdram days as a teenager, is don't turn into too much of a villain. Because I remember playing the Demon of Discontent or something like that in Mother Goose. And I was like 14, 15, back at this little Barnfield theatre. And it became so many, I went way too hard with it. And about at least 4 kids a show would leave in tears. So having going back to it now over 15, 16 years later, you're like, okay, should probably just make it a bit more fun. Know your place in the show, because ultimately you're a storyteller, but you can blur the lines a little bit. But make sure you know the approach and the archetype that you're going in before you step into the rehearsal room.
Yeah, and I mean, and we've said a lot before on these Cuppa chats that Panto is for the whole family. It is for the youngsters and the oldies, and we don't want people to be running out scared. Obviously, we want them to have a moment of being, oh gosh, they're gonna win as such, but we don't want them to be terrified, do we? Really?
No, not at all.
Thinking back to early days, where did your panto love start? You know, a lot of people say they went to the theatre with mum, dad, or they went with their school. Where did it start for you, Sam?
So I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. I think I've got a very hazy memory of seeing Cinderella at the Theatre Royal Plymouth when I was like 3 or 4. But then I think because I was very much the show-off kid when I was growing up. And there's a photo I always remember, I think it was like year 2 or year 3, where we did the Wizard of Oz as our Christmas show. And I was one of like 25 Tin Men, but I remember that. And I think for my love of Panto, I think actually came out of as a kid, sort of growing up. We went to go watch it every year, and it was always like a smart. My mum always did it. I mean, now that's sacked off completely, but it used to be for going to the theatre. You get dressed in your nicest clothes, and then you go.
Yeah.
I do miss that a little bit, but I just remember that it was a big event to go watch the Panto. And I was the ITV Pantos actually. I remember,
Yeah.
and I got instantly was just obsessed with them because they play on ITV1 when they first came out, and then they start going on ITV2. I just remember watching them, but so much so I could probably quote them back. And I think that's where my love came from, because it's silly and it's stupid, and I think it's that quirkiness and obscure humor has always sort of appealed to me.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's just it's the humor, it's the amazement when you're a kid. It's
Mm.
just the whole package, really, that at least for me, I remember sitting there and just being, completely like, this is real as a kid,
Yeah.
obviously. And then I like to think now that I'm making those memories for the kids in the audience nowadays as well.
Yeah.
Is there a role that because you've said you've done quite a lot, obviously, is there a role that you still would like to do that you haven't had the chance yet?
Yes, I would love to play King Rat in Dick Whittington, and
Hmm.
I've been campaigning for you because the company, because I've been with the same company for this will be my 7th year with Trio. I love working with him. I love Kev who runs the company. He's a good friend of mine, but he refuses to do Dick Whittington. Trying to get a Scouser to do Dick Whittington is near impossible. But I've been wearing him down for years just because I really want to play King Rat. It was one of the first villains that I fell in love with.
Why? Go on, explain why. Why?
I think it's because I've always seen, I know people can play it very harshly, but I remember seeing it, I think it might have been at the Northcott in Exeter years ago. But I just see King Rat as instantly, it's got the big scary, but it's also really camp at the same time. I don't know how you can be fully scared of a man who's got this weird pink nose and 2 sticky out. It's just something about that's the perfect blend of camp. And it's just the story. I love the story of Dick Whittington as well. So to actually be part of that that's on my list somewhere.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll happen one day. Just keep. Was it Kev? Was it Kev
Yeah,
that you were trying to? Right,
yeah, I'm
Kev,
wearing him
listen
down.
here. Listen here, Kev. Panto Archive says it's Dick Whittington next year. Get it sorted so Sam can do it. Sam, we've
I'm gonna get in
almost
trouble
come.
for that.
I know. Well, it's all right. I'll take the blame. It's all right. Sam, we've almost come to the end of our cuppa chat, believe it or not. But before we finish up, I must ask you a very important question, which I'm asking every single person who's taken part in our series.
Mhm.
If you could be performing on stage with anyone, past or present, in a pantomime, who would they be and what show would you want to do with them?
Ooh. I'm gonna stick with Dick Whittington,
Yeah, yeah, that's fair enough.
and I'm going off which to this day is still possibly the best panto I've ever seen. I would love to, and it's a recently passed, but I saw Dame Edna play the fairy Bowbells in Dick Whittington, only panto they've ever done at the New Wimbledon. If I could be part of that production, I don't care. I'd be a stagehand in that production quite happily. But that would be anyone past or present be to work with Dame Edna Everidge in Dick Whittington.
Or as King Rat.
Even better. That's better than working as a. I mean, no, not to do no disrespect to the
No,
stagehands at all. They
no, of
work
course not.
very, very hard. But if I could muck around on stage with them, even better.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that we've lost a couple of fantastic performers. Dame Edna this year, Paul O'Grady. The best at their act, aren't they?
Yeah.
And even if people try nowadays to take little elements from it, they're never going to beat them, are they, Sam? They're never going to beat them.
No, not at all.
Well, Sam, thank you so much for joining us on the Cuppa Chat today. Will you tell us where you are performing again this Christmas?
Yes, so I am performing in Beauty and the Beast this Christmas. We're at 3 venues. We are at the Melton Theatre, we're at the Exmouth Pavilion, and then we're finally at the Majestic Theatre in Retford in the new year.
Perfect. And you can find all those details on the Panto Archive current listings page. Sam, thank you so much. And we'll see you all again very soon. See you later, guys.